And we're live. It is Thursday, May 14th, 2020, 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific Time. Forget Boris Johnson. Forget Kim Jong-un. We have huge breaking news on In Lieu of Fun. Courtesy of Newsweek, huge saber-toothed anchovies emerged after the dinosaurs went extinct in what scientists are calling a failed evolutionary experiment. I want to repeat those words. Huge. I mean, not small, not the kind of things you can pack into little tins, but 3.5 foot long saber-tooth. And they had, unlike the saber-tooth cat, these saber-tooth anchovies had one saber-tooth, you know, like they had these fangs up this way. And
they're like unicorn saber-tooths?
They were unicorn saber-tooth. And then here's the really, and then they were anchovies. And that, of course, raises the question of whether we had huge saber-tooth Caesar salads. But
you've been waiting to say that on air like all day. I can
all day, all fucking day. All right. There's one other thing about the huge saber-tooth anchovies that I just have to share with you. The saber-tooth is not in the middle. Okay. Here is how Newsweek reports it. In the study, they say the fossils analyzed represent a new clade of large body clupeiform fish, an order that includes anchovies and herrings. These new species are characterized with a single row of fang-like teeth on the lower jaw, with none on the upper jaw other than the single giant fang.
Yeah, I wonder why they went extinct. That seems like such a great idea. Like
Capo Bianco said teeth. Jaws like this are, quote, completely unique, bad, you should never modify the word unique, and unprecedented in any other fish, unquote. He added that the saber tooth is slightly offset from the middle, giving the fish a slightly asymmetric appearance and making them appear even more unusual.
Unfortunate would be the term some people would use.
Yeah, we are not allowed to have fun any. We are not allowed to have fun anymore.
Saber-tooth?
I don't know. It's just too good. We're not allowed to have fun anymore. And after 9 million years on Earth, the saber-tooth anchovy is also not allowed to have fun anymore. It went extinct around 45 million years ago. But in lieu of fun, we have at Pope Hat himself, Ken White. Welcome to In Lieu of Fun.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here again.
Let's start with the question that everybody wants to ask you every time we see at Pope Hat with a different kind of hat. You change your Twitter handle more often than all other people combined, like almost daily.
This is what I was going to say. Like the Twitter handle changing is kind of like teenagers used to change their AOL Instant Messenger away message or something. Like
awesome.
It's just like this. Yes, it's just like this new medium to express things, and you do it so well.
You're very kind. Well, you know, it's better than actually having to think something intelligent to say about the issue. So,
and you do it often. But it's often a commentary on the goings on. So the last time I looked at your Twitter feed, it may have changed from since then. The last time it was no limiting principle hat. Is it still that?
Yeah, I don't think I've changed it since then.
Yeah, so, you know, that is a little commentary on the oral arguments in Mazars. And, you know, for those of you out there who didn't listen to the Mazars argument, the conservative justices were looking for a limiting principle to the idea that Congress can subpoena just about anything pursuant to its legislative purpose and authority and investigative standards. And So you often have these little sort of embedded social commentaries in it, but none of these answer the underlying question that I want to ask you every time, which is, why is your Twitter feed at Pope Hat, and why is your blog called Pope Hat?
Well, it's an old inside joke among friends. The blog has been there, I guess, since 2008 or so. And it's a reference to a friend who liked to make origami. And he was very good at making an origami Pope's hat, which he would put on and wear during poker games. And it transpired that he was often unbeatable when he was wearing the Pope's hat. So given already concepts of papal infallibility, the evidence that the Pope's hat seemed to make him actually infallible, and the idea that bloggers kind of consider themselves infallible, unchallengeable, it seemed appropriate. And since then, it's inertia mostly, because once it sticks to you, how are you going to change it?
Oh my God, I love that etymology. That's amazing.
and
like,
totally not what I was expecting.
Yeah, not at all what I was expecting.
I was totally expecting something like it was out of anger because you're an ex-Catholic during the pre-sexual abuse scandal or something. I had this whole narrative.
I am an ex-Catholic, but that's not where it comes from.
Fair enough.
So can I ask the other question, which is like, I think, well, Twitter was founded in 2008. So that's like kind of when people were signing up their accounts and everything. It makes sense that you also started a blog then. But kind of, it's interesting. I just remember following you for as long as I have been on Twitter. And there were a couple of really big people way back in the day. I can't remember her name. Anne-Marie, she was, I can't remember. But anyways, how did you kind of like get such a huge following? Like, was it just slow over time? Did you have a few big moments? Do you remember?
It was slow over time. Really, my friend and co-writer Patrick, who runs the exceptionally good fake North Korean Twitter account, is the one who started.
How do I not follow that? I have to go follow that.
PPRK News Service as a guest?
Yes, the one that repeatedly punks members of the media. Perhaps most famously, the time they got a Norwegian paper to report that North Korea was about to launch a rocket attack on Cyprus, which it, in point of fact, was not. But Patrick and
that's what they want you to think.
Yeah, Patrick and Derek, another friend and co-writer at the blog, just have a real ear for propaganda and the way those news services sound. And Patrick is absolutely brilliant at using North Korean press releases to comment on American political events. And so it's one of my favorite things on Twitter. But he was the one who started the Pope Hat Twitter account, and it took me a year or two to get involved. And eventually I did get involved. And I think where it started to take off in terms of followers was when I started writing about a few big ticket things in the news from various subcultures. So a few years back, there was a big case concerning a copyright trolling law firm called Prenda Law. Basically, what they were doing is they were seeding pornography movies on torrent and then suing people when they downloaded them. So they were creating it was a honeypot. And they were very arrogant, and they were suing people all over the country. And then they had a long, gruesome downfall that resulted in two of them going to jail and losing their bar cards and things like that. So writing about that got a whole lot of people from a bunch of different subcultures that were interested in that. And so, someone went and made vigorous defamation threats over a popular cartoonist, and I covered that saga, and that got a lot of people. And over the time, I just found I enjoy sort of demystifying the law. I enjoy taking this bizarre system that is like, a priest language that's impenetrable to most Americans, and writing about it in a way so they can follow what's going on, and maybe it's a little entertaining and they can follow the story better next time. And that, and sort of, I guess, being something of a wise ass and an elbow thrower will get people following you on Twitter.
Wow. So I have to tell you, in legal blogger to legal blogger honor hat tip kind of thing, or Pope hat tip, I was asked to give the commencement address at a small private high school in DC a year ago or so. And I went into the school, and a particularly forward young student said to me, Jesus, you know, we're going to have a legal blogger as the commencement speaker, and we can't have Pope hat, so we're having you. Which I thought was pretty awesome. And I've been waiting to tell you that story for about a year. I thought telling it on Twitter was probably not the best idea, but it was, I mean, the disappointment in his voice that like he was settling for the second string was very precious, and I appreciated it.
I think that probably
and with the candor that only like a 17-year-old can muster.
Well, I think that signifies that 17-year-olds are probably more fond of taint jokes and things like that than they are of really in-depth legal analysis, which is you're more reliably a source of.
Yeah. Well, that's very, very kind of you. The magnanimity of the victor. All right. So I have a question for you about General Flynn.
Okay.
So the Venn diagrams of our agreement on General Flynn are very substantial. That is, we have both argued that Michael Flynn was treated exactly the way the FBI treats a whole lot of people, and that the Justice Department's sudden solicitude for his plight is a reflection of, it's an argument that they've never made before, and as you put it on this week's All the President's Lawyers, will probably never make again. That the Justice Department normally insists that these tactics are appropriate and reasonable, and certainly not illegal, and that they've discovered their inner defense lawyer only in the context of something that the president, somebody that the president has been tweeting hundreds of times is a sort of innocent man, subject, sort of collateral victim of the coup against the president. So far, we're in 100% agreement, but you always caveat this with the sort of defense lawyers. I don't believe, you know, if they want to ban these practices in general, if they want to, you know, as a policy matter, say that the Justice Department shouldn't be doing this stuff, I'm with them. And so I don't want to get to the edge cases, because the edge cases are genuinely ugly, and I would agree with you about. But I want to know if there's anything specific that was done to Michael Flynn that you have a problem with. Because I look at the record in this case, and at the end of the day, what I see is a couple of FBI agents show up in the office of the National Security Advisor to the president. We're not talking about some, you know, some Muslim kid who you know, has been noodling around on the internet and has no idea, you know, doesn't know the people that he's dealing with, right? Or some, you know, some you know, poor schlub who's been, you know, coerced into doing some stuff for the you know, for MS-13. We're talking about the National Security Advisor of the United States, who has been covertly running his own foreign policy and is an unregistered foreign agent of Turkey. And they ask him some questions about some conversations that he in fact had. He, you know, with Sergei Kislyak, with the Egyptians, and he lies through his teeth. In what sense was the FBI engaged in any dirty pool with Michael Flynn that you would, as a policy matter, prohibit?
They were, in effect, creating a crime. You could say that they were offering the opportunity for a crime, if you think that's a better way to do it. But to me, it is fundamentally offensive when you have the statute that says, if you lie to the FBI, you commit a felony. The policy behind this is not that the FBI is some sort of religious figure that is owed some sort of devotion, and that if we break it, we've committed blasphemy. The idea is we don't want people interfering with investigations and thwarting investigations. I don't think the purposes of the law are served if what you have is the FBI knowing a fact for sure and rolling in and talking to someone, putting them to the test, hoping they'll lie so that there'll be a crime they can prosecute them for. To me, that's not something where the lie actually did any real and articulable harm. That's something.
Yeah, but hang on a second. The FBI didn't go there to create a crime. The FBI went there because Michael Flynn, they had what they thought of as a counterintelligence emergency, which is that the FBI, they're sort of sitting around doing their FBI thing. They've got an open CI investigation on Michael Flynn. And then all of a sudden, the United States imposes sanctions on Russia for interfering in our election. And mysteriously, the Russians don't respond. And Vladimir Putin makes this really responsible and restrained statement that nobody can explain. And so I don't know whether it was Jim Comey or Andy McCabe or Bill Priestap or somebody underneath, says, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. There's got to be an explanation. Let's look at everything we've got and figure out what might explain Vladimir Putin not responding to a series of of sanctions that Barack Obama has imposed. And they go and they look at their holdings, and whoa, the national security advisor, incoming national security advisor, national security principal on the transition, is actually on the phone with the Russian ambassador saying, please only respond in a measured fashion. I don't want to get into a tit for tat. And that is happening, and all of a sudden seems to be the only thing that explains the actions of a head of state of a rival foreign power. And so they do what it seems to me any reasonable investigative entity would do, leaving aside their little dispute with the Justice Department about how to do it, which let's bracket that, because we actually both agree that has no legal consequences whatsoever. It might affect the way you think of Jim Comey, but it's not actually important from a legal perspective with respect to Flynn. So they do what any reasonable investigative entity would do, which is they send a couple agents over to say what gives. And then the guy lies through his teeth, and he lies through his teeth about a whole bunch of stuff that they know, because they have the transcript, and he knows they have the transcript because he used to run the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he knows that they have coverage of all of these guys.
But that's just the thing. If they know, why are they asking the question?
Because they're not doing a criminal investigation. They're doing a national security investigation.
But again, even if it's a national security investigation, if they have the transcript, if they know he called, they know when he called, they know what he said, why go in and put it, hey, did you talk to him? Unless one of the purposes is to see, will he lie? Now, the notes that came out have been largely misrepresented in the media, misunderstood, not seen in context. But the part of them that is real is that they reflect them thinking about, is part of our play here going to be to see if he lies, and then we can charge him, because that is an absolutely routine tactic.
Is that what they were doing, or is it what they were trying to do was figure out why he was doing it, like why he was having those conversations? I mean, the people who went over and interviewed him are not criminal investigators, right? These are the FBI counterintelligence people. They don't care if people committed a crime.
Sure they do. They still are interested in that, and they will refer it. And here's the thing. If they were genuinely interested in why he did it, they would immediately push back and say, well, you say you don't remember, but here, I got the transcript right here. Why did you say this? That's the way you handle an interview if you want to know the why. You show them the evidence and you ask them to explain it. The only way you conduct it with going in with having 100% knowledge, you ask them the question, they lie, you don't push back, is if you want to collect the lie to get a free conviction.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a second about a client to give you an illustration?
Yeah, sure.
So client gets caught up in some political corruption as a gopher, basically. The feds have him at a meeting. They have him recorded, surveilled at the meeting, and they have a tape recording of him at the meeting. So they roll up at his house at 7 in the morning, in the middle of nowhere, grab him out of bed, start executing a search warrant. It's a team of armed agents. They throw him in the back of a government car. 2 FBI agents sit on either side of him. He's in his pajamas, and they start asking questions. A note that, of course, they would say he's not in custody because he's free to leave. So they ask him, were you at this meeting? And he says, no, I wasn't, because he panics, makes a bad decision, he talks to them, and he lies. They were not deterred for a minute. They didn't ask follow-up questions because they knew all they had to do is ask that question. And if he said yes, it helped their case. And if he said no, it gave him a 1001 charge. And to me, that is manufacturing a crime. It is not rationally related to actually protecting the investigatory process. It is not remedying something that did harm to the investigation. It is purely allowing the federal agents to select Americans to put to a moral test at any given moment, that if they fail, they get a felony.
Can I just follow up on that briefly, which is that, to your point, Ben, and I do think this is very different. So I don't know if I agree with how this relates to Flynn, but I will share my own kind of observation and experience with this, which is when I was in the EDNY, I was clerking, and we had a terrorism case that was so it was one of the most disturbing things that I'd worked on then, and then continues to be. And it was just, and I don't do this stuff for a living, so this was kind of my first blush with it. But it was this kid, a 19-year-old kid in Staten Island who was Muslim and seemed to have looked at some extremist videos on the internet. And so his ISP got scooped up, right? And they traced it to his house, and they started to, and then they set in this kind of all of these people that were staged to talk to them. And it certainly was not entrapment. That's not even it could never be called that. But eventually this kid ended up buying a ticket to go to Pakistan, to go to to an Islam, and lied to federal prosecutors on his way there. But if you look at every single step along the way, you can almost see, and you can, again, all of this evidence is public, but you could almost see how it could cut both ways. Yes, he wanted to go do this thing, maybe join a terrorist group and become an extremist, right? And maybe they thwarted that. But also, a lot of the people talking to him and giving him access into that world were actual federal agents in the US government. And so him saying yes to it was would he have ever said yes to it if this was happening? And so it's in the Falls graph test and the causality type of all of this stuff, it's so unknown. There are too many unknowns to ever kind of to know what happened. And I'm not saying that this actually kind of necessarily applies to Flynn. In fact, I have different views on that, but I'm just saying this does happen. And I think that Ken's point about this, that this is kind of the game that all federal agents play with these falling back. And by the way, this guy was convicted for 13 years by a jury for 2 counts or 3 counts of lying to federal agents.
So I am totally amenable to the idea that 1001 is abused. I am resisting the idea that 1001 is abused when the national security advisor to the president of the United States has a conversation with the Russian ambassador in which he makes a series of representations and requests, and then for counterintelligence as opposed to criminal investigative reasons, a couple FBI agents show up at in his office, ask him, he's given advance notice that they're coming over, and they ask him a bunch of questions, and he lies through his teeth on a range of subjects, by the way, not limited to that conversation. I just don't think that's within 100 miles of an abuse of 1001. And to me, the amazing thing about it is that it took nearly a year from the time that conversation took place to the time Michael Flynn was indicted or was forced to plea.
Let me ask you this, Benjamin. Do you think that average, sophisticated, educated people with power who normally live a decent life, they don't knock over banks, they don't cheat on their taxes, do you think when confronted with questions about something they did, they tend to tell the truth or they tend to lie?
So I think that is a very good defense lawyer question.
I was going to say the same thing. Oh my God, I don't know what to answer that.
Number one, they tend to lie.
They tend to lie.
Number two, this is the national security advisor to the President of the United States, who is confronted with a secret conversation that he had with a foreign power while he was an unregistered foreign agent for a different foreign power. And by the way, just to like drive the anvil home or the ice pick home, I don't think the FBI ever meant to charge him with this. I think what happened was he was in a world of criminal hurt on a bunch of other stuff, and so was his son. And so about a year later, Mueller allows him to plead down to the mere 1001 felony that he's got, which he forthrightly acknowledged in court and has been running away from ever since. And so
here's the thing you have to understand about that is that the 1001 makes it a game changer. So you can have a case where the substantive offenses are defensible. You know, the things that my guy were accused of in that corruption case were defensible. But once you throw in the easy mode 1001, that's basically an automatic win for the government, then you know you're going to get a felony no matter what. And it changes the entire analysis of what you defend, what you take to trial, what you don't.
So what if he had been charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping? Which, you know, if you take the Wall Street Journal's report seriously, he may have had some serious exposure on. Michael Flynn was involved in a series of discussions about an extrajudicial rendering of the Turkish cleric Fethullah Gulen. And so imagine that Bob Mueller had really thrown the book at him. He charges him with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, being an unregistered foreign agent of Turkey, and whatever else they had. And they probably had a lot. And by the way, he indicts his son as well, who had some other issues. And they had reached a plea deal post indictment that had been down to this piddly lie. Because that's, I think, very close to what happened here.
Well, yes, it's a classic cooperation plea agreement. It's because they think he's going to be a useful cooperator. They give him the lightest possible outcome, which is a plea to 1001, which, you know, unless you completely step in it, you're going to get probation.
And he completely stepped in it, except that he
stepped in it heroically.
Made the president happy.
Yes.
With that, I'm going to kind of transition. We have a great question from Matthew Chekhov. I hope we pronounced that correctly. No idea. If you are watching the show for the first time, or if you watch the show generally, please follow us on Twitter and on YouTube and retweet us or tell your friends or whatever.
And subscribe on YouTube and tweet about this show, because like we do no promotion of it of any kind. It's just this. This is, by the way, our 50th show.
Oh yeah!
Congratulations!
Congratulations,
we have done it.
Ken.
Yeah,
thanks for being our 50th. You were like you were an early adopter too. You showed up at like our first Mystery Sunday, I think.
And so like we do no promotion of this. This is just something that Kate and I do kind of for fun every every day at 5:00 p.m. We don't usually start with saber-toothed anchovy news. We start with Boris Johnson and Kim Jong-un news, but like you should come back and we have really great conversations with all kinds of people. We don't usually have 400 people live watching it. But share it on whatever social media services you use, and it's cool to have you here.
Yeah, awesome.
Pleasure.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. So first off, I want to say that I am a huge fan of both Ben and Ken. I listen to All the President's Lawyers. I listen to every Lawfare podcast. I listen to every Rational Security podcast. I was actually on the webinar yesterday too.
You're a great American. And by the way, I like just saying, this is not sort of blowing smoke up the guest's ass, but All the President's Lawyers is amazingly sophisticated about a lot of things about which a lot of people are not sophisticated. And if Ken asks me, I will say my minor gripes about the show. But the really important thing is that Ken actually Josh isn't here, and I don't know Josh, but Josh and Ken do a really astonishing job talking. Ken described earlier liking to demystify the law, and as somebody who does a bit of that professionally, they do an incredible job for a mass audience at just kind of surveying the land of the legal issues the president is facing. And there is nothing out there that is in its league in terms of, surveying the entire landscape of the president's legal issues on a weekly basis and making it accessible. And I as somebody who does something tangentially similar to that, I am very aware of how difficult that project is, and I really salute them.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a college senior actually, Ken. So I'm planning to go to law school, but I really appreciate you make it really easy to understand. And Rational Security and the Lawfare podcast also does a great job. I listened to the one with Steve Loddick yesterday, and it was really good. But to my question, Oren Kerr tweeted this actually just like an hour ago, and he was talking about the emoluments fight and how it's going to the Supreme Court now. And the emoluments fight, I mean, I've been hearing, you talk about it in All the President's Lawyers for a while now. And what he says in his second tweet, he says, going forward, perhaps Congress should enact a statute requiring fast-track consideration of certain claims of presidential power. For example, maybe review goes straight from the trial court to SCOTUS, which is then required to decide the case. Otherwise, you never get answers. So I was kind of wondering, like Mazars, I think Trump sued to stop enforcement of the subpoena in like April 2019. You have the McFadden case with the tax returns in district court right now. You have so many cases that are kind of in the district or appeals courts levels that are just not going to be ever decided before Trump leaves office. So I'm wondering if you think that maybe one of the first things, or maybe if not one of the first things, something that the next Congress should do is kind of create a law that would fast track these cases so that future presidents can't just stall to try to stop oversight from happening.
Well, it's a political decision, and because such a law would be a political comment on emoluments and how they've been handled here. So I don't think it's in the cards, but I think I would be more inclined to have some sort of set of cases that have a fast track in the Court of Appeals rather than skipping straight to the Supreme Court as a small, weird array of court cases do. I think that the Court of Appeals has a very important function of streamlining the issues and of boiling them down to what's important. And I think if you skipped that step and went straight to the Supreme Court, it would be much more of a mess. So when you're the trial court's going to be the big mess. It's going to have the most information. It may have, evidence in addition to briefs, and the process of narrowing that down to what the issues are in appeal to the Court of Appeal, and then that court narrowing it further, I think is what makes it wind up in a form that's suitable for the Supreme Court to look at it. The Supreme Court really isn't good at doing cleanup of a messy record. They tend to throw their hands up and back away from it. So I think if you had stuff going straight from the trial court to the Supreme Court, I don't know that you would get as useful rulings. I think you'd get a whole lot of this issue and isn't clear to us, so we're sending it back.
But just to be fair, like if you're in federal court, like if you're in federal district court, it's not a fast track to the appellate court. That's just like the next level, right? You don't need a special law to do that. That's just exactly what happens already. So, I mean, like, yeah, I kind of agree with you. Like, I kind of don't know if what Oren is suggesting is like a special court of means or a special court of like subject matter court to deal with these types of things that isn't SCOTUS. But I'm just kind of curious at your answer. Like, it doesn't seem like an appellate court would be a fast track at all. It would just be the normal route.
Yeah, but what I would suggest is some sort of fast track briefing schedule. We've seen courts do that on a case by case basis in some of these cases. Now my cases, from appeal to decision in the Ninth Circuit is routinely 2 years. It can be longer in state courts, but
it'd be faster in the DC Circuit.
Yeah, but the courts are able to set
or the Eastern District of Virginia,
an accelerated briefing schedule, and say have a goal of having briefing, argument, to decision in say 4 months or something like that. All of a sudden, you've got a ball game, and it's something that might get resolved within a year.
All right, Ken Landa, the floor is yours.
I'm taking us back to the Flynn discussion. And it occurs to me, thinking about what the agents would have known that Flynn knows about their access to information and transcripts, it would be surprising to me if they actually did expect him to lie, if they had set out to set that sort of perjury trap. And so I'm wondering whether perhaps the lie shocked them, but then they realized that he's made himself so extortable at this point by having lied to them and then potentially denying the conversation to others. And so is it possible they found themselves in a situation they didn't anticipate, setting aside the many other times where the question is asked for the purpose of generating the lie, which becomes the leverage?
Ken Landa, sit down. I have news about people for you, and it's going to make you sad. People are powerfully stupid. And yes, they absolutely anticipated a lie, a clumsy lie, an easily disprovable lie. I think the notes reflect that was part of the thought process. And FBI agents are trained in this type of thing. And the truth is that smart people, educated people, powerful people in that situation tell breathtakingly stupid lies. And, I have to stab a pen into the back of my hand to stop myself from screaming at clients when they said, oh, yeah, and then I said this. And I said, well, but why would you say that? They can figure that out. They'll know it's not true. And they're saying, well, it was in the moment. I was excited. I was scared.
I want to push back on this. I don't think the FBI ever intended to charge him with this. I think they went over there. And I think you're thinking like a criminal defense lawyer, not like a counterintelligence guy. And they went over there because they had an emergency situation where the individual in question had just had had a covert foreign contact and lied about it to the vice president. And they went over there because they had a potentially compromised individual who was, they were trying to figure out why he did it. And they were the last thing on their minds, although admittedly, Bill Priestap, wrote in these musings, what's our objective here? Their concern was, is there a compromised individual right next to the president? And that is really different from your client situation or a normal 1001 situation. I don't think it dawns on anyone to charge him with 1001 until he's in negotiations with Mueller's people and they're figuring out what the smallest piddly shit charge they can agree with him that he certainly committed was. And while, and that carries the potential, that looks as conventional as possible because they're actually trying to rehabilitate a potentially useful witness. And so they agree with him to allow him to plea to this garbage little charge. And I think you're assuming that when the agents go over there, they're trying to set him up for this. And I think
I don't think Ken's assuming that. I think that Ken's saying that basically, like, Ken's kind of like painting the case of like what in his understanding most agents do, and then kind of applying that to this situation, which is of course exceptional in many ways. And we can kind of agree it is, but I think that like you're right in saying that Ken is bringing a defense person's mindset to this, because frankly, that is true.
By the way, he should be.
Agents don't go in with like just one agenda or one goal. They have a bag of tricks, okay? And they call an audible during the interview and they determine where it's going to go. But they go in there as that memo reflects, knowing that they have an array of choices depending on how it goes. If they get a lie, they can use the lie later, and it's a tool. And even if they're not planning at the time that our big goal is to charge this guy with 1001, they absolutely know when they collect the lie, well, now we have a lie, and that can be of use later. They may go in and think, we'll see how it goes. If it lies, it depends on how he lies. Because if they're really as interested.
So I'm totally with you on that. That just
what's wrong with it is
totally reasonable.
What's wrong with that is when they turn it into a crime afterwards. I do not think it is a legitimate function of law enforcement to go in and use a moral failing that does not, in fact, harm the government and turn it into a felony. I just don't think it's a legitimate function of government.
It reminds me of that moment in The Wire where they take the copier and hold the guy's hand on the copier and tell him it's a lie detector. And then act like, do you remember this like thing? I mean, it's just like, there's just kind of like, but this is, when you say bag of tricks, I don't want to say that I don't trust law enforcement, like always. In fact, I grew up the opposite.
I think you're both left-wing wusses.
What?
I think you're both left-wing wusses.
Oh my God.
We got about 100 people live on Zoom here and about 400 people on YouTube live, and there are going to be a bunch of other people watching this. All of you should tweet this and share it on Facebook. But I just want to say to all of you, when the FBI shows up in your house, you have, or at your office.
I'm going to call Ken White to be my attorney.
You've got two
That's
choices.
what I'm going to do.
You've got two choices, and only two. One, you shut up and you say, I have a Fifth Amendment right not to say anything more, and until my lawyer is here, and by the way, I don't have a lawyer, but until I have one, I have absolutely nothing to say. It's lovely to see you. I'll make you tea, but we are not having a conversation right now. That is option number one. Option number two is to tell the truth. And I know,
false option.
I know,
false option.
Ken, I know Ken and Kate are gonna say,
don't tell the truth.
But I personally know a lot of people who have used option number two and have done just fine with it. But the option that you don't have, and I think Ken will agree with me about this, is to think, I am a really smart guy. And between us, I really am a smart guy, and I'm going to outwit the system. And I have a version of events here that's going to fool these jackass cops who have delusions of grandeur in front of me, and whose idea of how to write a piece is an FBI 302. You know, I'm going to outwit them. And that fucking never works. And that's what Mike Flynn did. And I have zero sympathy for that in somebody like him.
I don't have sympathy so much for it. It's not about having sympathy. It's about
Wait, do you
what
disagree
think
with the analysis, first of all?
Yes. Let me tell you why.
Are we okay?
You're,
go ahead.
You're all wet on telling the truth being a good idea without counsel. Here's why. Number one, you don't know whether or not you committed a crime. You don't know all the facts of the situation. You don't know all the laws, most likely. There are too many laws for you to know, and there are facts you don't know about. So maybe you've done something wrong and you don't realize it. So telling the truth is not safe. Second of all, you're not infallible. You don't remember everything correctly, particularly if the FBI is asking you questions and then not giving you an opportunity. Are you sure? Are you maybe forgetting this letter? Are you maybe forgetting this email? If they're not doing that, it is easy for you to forget something, get something wrong, and have them take it as a lie. Remember, they're not recording. They refuse to record the interviews. Instead, they're going to write up a report of their version of events of what happened at the interviews. So for all these reasons, it is a damn fool thing to do to tell the truth to the FBI without your lawyer first having thoroughly debriefed you on the issues and prepared you.
Oh, so I'm totally okay with, by the way, call Ken White first and then cooperate with the assistance of counsel. That is totally fine. My point isn't just spill your guts to the FBI. That's not my point at all. My point is don't fucking lie. Don't think you're going to outwit the system. Are we in agreement on that?
We are. But here's the thing. Being a defense lawyer increasingly requires you to comprehend and appreciate the limitations of your fellow humans. And one of those limitations is the way we act when we're tired or angry or horny or lazy or whatever it is. We make dumb choices. One of the dumb choices we are primed to make is to go and blurt out a lie to try to talk ourselves out of a situation. It's very human. It's very stupid. The question is, should it be a felony when it didn't deter the government or hurt the government one goddamn bit? I say it should not.
So let's ask the big blue blogger. Because here
Ben.
he is. Michael, the big blue blogger, has a question, and who's getting the better of this argument, Big Blue, Ken or me?
I don't want to take sides. I just want to salute Kate for not litigating the question of you being a really, really smart guy. And I'll leave it at that.
You know, I just want to say, Big Blue, sometimes we say things for the pose in the moment. And when you are on a Zoom show, that is a totally legit thing to do. And when the FBI is in your office, that is the sort of thing that gets you indicted. Now, I happen to know Pete Strzok personally. And if he were in my office asking me questions, depending on how innocent I was, I would either cooperate very fully, or I would call Ken White and say, I am not saying another word until my lawyer is here.
It's just not like a particularly, it's like a false dichotomy that you keep casting. Like, this is just not like, yes, people can call their attorney, people talk and people sit there and they manipulate them into talking, and you're sitting with two people and they're in your kitchen and you've given them tea as you suggested doing to them.
I am your best friend. I am your defense lawyer today.
And then you tell them that you gave them 3 lumps of sugar instead of 2 lumps of sugar, and suddenly you're caught in a lie. And there's that type of thing.
You don't do that. You do not have a conversation with federal law enforcement unless A, you are represented by counsel, or B, you are extremely confident that you can answer their questions
You're
truthfully
wrong.
Ken and
You're
I are
in a
both
wrong.
fashion
shaking
that
our
does
heads.
not incriminate you.
You don't have a conversation with counsel. You don't have a conversation without counsel.
Having done that myself, I'm going to disagree with you.
So Michael, you have a question.
Yes, and I'm hoping we can turn our attention to Judge Sullivan for a moment.
Oh, good. I love Emmett Sullivan. He
Well,
presided over the Ted Stevens trial.
Let's ask,
I think-
is he long-suffering Judge Emmett Sullivan, or is he just U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan, Ken?
I think it depends on mood to some extent. You know, it certainly depends on whether you're addressing him. Never judge in that case. Always Your Honor.
Exactly, Your Honor. All right, Big Blue, floor is yours.
Thanks, Ben. I'm very sad to have learned from my Fever Swamp friends that Judge Sullivan has earned himself a ticket to Gitmo, where I guess he can share a cell with you and Peter and Lisa.
Yeah, because Pete and I, you know, I don't know if Pete will be upset with me, but every time one of these things happens, Pete texts me a link to it with the words "top bunk!" exclamation mark. And I you know, maybe he's going to be upset with me about that, but you know, that's one of our things that, you know, we argue over the top bunk at Gitmo, and you know, there you have it.
My advice would be, yeah, stay on the bottom bunk. I have a general question and a specific question. The general question is, okay, he's solicited amicus briefs. He's brought in Judge Gleason to argue I guess, in loco parentis for the Justice Department. And the general question is, what do you think of that? The specific question is, my right-wing Fever Swamp friends are also pointing to Justice Ginsburg's opinion in Sinning Smith as indicating that the Supreme Court really doesn't like it when judges do this stuff and solicit amicus briefs on topics that the litigants haven't brought up. So is that a valid argument, and is he going to Gitmo?
It is not a valid argument. What happened in the one that where the Supreme Court just reversed unanimously a Ninth Circuit case is that the Ninth Circuit on its own came up with a completely different theory of the case that the plaintiff had not pursued. One, that there was the law was overbroad under the First Amendment, as opposed to just invalid on its face against this person. And no one had suggested that, and the Ninth Circuit completely drove the show. Here, by contrast, the issues are all already before the judge. The issues are, should the judge or should the judge not dismiss this? And the type of thing the judge is contemplating, the pursuing somebody for contempt, is within the judge's inherent power. So it's already something the judge can raise on their own. So it really, the two are nothing alike.
Cool.
All right. We have a veritable, I think the technical term is a shitload of questions here that people want to ask. And so, Kate, what do you think? Should we plan on wrapping on time at 6 o'clock, which would give us 7 minutes? Or should we just
I don't think some of these are redundant and they're not all kind of like, they're all good, but they're kind of like building on each other. I think generally, I would just kind of like to
who should we go to next?
Yeah, I kind of would like to just wrap up with some general questions to Ken, which is kind of just about, like about your practice and about like kind of, you know.
Oh, no.
I actually also, I know, but like, it's really interesting that you were in the U.S. Attorney's Office for so long.
Yeah, you used to be on the light side, and then you went over to the dark side, or vice versa.
Or vice versa.
Yeah, I'm not sure which, to be honest.
And that's like a pretty typical path, you know, like a lot of people go from like the U.S. Attorney's Office or like a district attorney's office into like a into a defender kind of role. But I don't know, you're really good at explaining the law to people. I feel like a lot of people don't understand how people do defense work, like morally do defense work. And and that's something that and I've never understood that. I'm always kind of like, well, everybody needs somebody to stand up for them. Right. But there has got to be kind of more than that. Is there something you can kind of explain about your transition?
For a long time, I wanted to be a prosecutor. since at least college. I did some summers at the district attorney's office. I was very much gung-ho. I'm going to be a prosecutor. I'm going to put the bad guys away and that type of thing. And it was really seeing how the system worked as a federal prosecutor that started to disenchant me with that. And case after case, I just questioned whether it was right, whether it was an appropriate use of resources, whether the drug war made any moral or political sense. And I don't know, if I had to pick a moment, it would be probably 1999. I don't know if you remember the Rampart scandal out here.
Sure do.
Rampart division of the LAPD had some very, very dirty, brutal cops. And there was a scandal about them and when they were caught doing things. And I was on what's called the dirty team. It means it was my job to go through transcripts of their statements and watch for anything that might be taken as coerced, which could then poison the well for the rest of the investigation. And I got to the point in this where I was reading this guy, Rafael Perez, joking about how he and his friends would come up to a threatened suicide call. And they'd get where the person is on the other side of the door, a few steps away on the bridge, whatever it is. And then they just laugh and tease and provoke the person who's doing it and laugh about it. And I kind of thought, am I on the right side? It's just like that. I don't know who the comics are who do it and Nazi universe. Are we the baddies? We have death heads on our lapel pins. So now I used to make fun of defense true believers as a young prosecutor. They irritated the hell out of me, but now I definitely am one. And I am because I think that the people do wrong things. They should be pursued. When appropriate, they should be punished. But the system by which we do that is grotesquely unfair and hideously broken. And shoving
hang on. If President Biden came in and offered you the U.S. attorney job for the Southern District of California, do you reject it because you're a U.S. attorney, you're a defense attorney, true believer, or do you accept it because some people do bad things and they need to be punished?
I reject it. I'm a defense attorney.
You're a defense attorney at this point.
I'm a defense attorney.
So I'm really interested in hearing, there's a lot of people that come out of public defenders' offices now, and there's a movement around defense attorneys, like in general, like Radley Belko, Scott Hechinger. Like there's a lot of people that have been talking about the role that people who believe in kind of true defense for everyone and that the system is so super broken, that the way to fix it is to put people in the prosecutor's offices that understand that the system is broken and that can thereby use their discretion in some type of like meaningful way. And so like it actually, like Ben's question kind of feeds into that for me. I was going to ask you that before, and then Ben's question kind of tees it up, which is like, don't you think that there's some type of power at the end of that nightstick, so to speak?
I think you could certainly help reform the system with prosecutors who want to do the right thing and who are part of a culture that encourages it. I know people like that and admire them. There are a lot of good prosecutors out there. I'm just not one of them anymore. I'm more machine than man now. I haven't been on the defense side.
I'd say the opposite, but sure.
But the thing is, it's much more than just changing the people or even changing the supervisors. It's changing the culture fundamentally, and how things are seen. Are the rules something that you have to try to get around? Are they impediments, or are they the rules by which everyone has agreed we're going to play? Is part of your obligation following them just as important as your obligation to vigorously represent the government in prosecuting this person? Those are the things that have to happen. Also, I just think we have to have some sort of serious real life consequences for misconduct, which we don't have. It is vanishingly rare for prosecutors to face any sort of real consequences for misconduct. And that has to change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a principles versus outcomes kind of approach. But I would also say that, like, to your point, and I'd encourage this of everyone, including of prosecutors, is like, to your point that humans are fallible and that people make missteps and people get tired and are horny or are withdrawing from alcohol or whatever when they're speaking to the police, so too are police having bad days and bad moments. And so too are prosecutors having, like, you know, their wives are divorcing them or their husbands are leaving them or something is happening. So like there's humans all the way down in this system. And I think that one of the biggest problems we have is that we try to ignore that in the legal system and how we teach it. And so it's just kind of like, that's, you know, you'd be a great law professor in my opinion.
You're very kind. The problem is we treat defendant frailty different than we treat cop or prosecutor frailty. We excuse some and we don't excuse the rest.
Yeah.
So I actually agree with that. So I don't want this conversation to obscure the vast Venn diagram overlap between our areas of agreement. We focused on the areas of disagreement, but I think the much more important point is that I think we, and correct me if I'm wrong, we both agree that the step the Justice Department took last week with respect to Flynn was aberrant with respect to its historical position, unlikely to be repeated in the future, and driven by the personality and relationship between the defendant and the president, rather than by any coherent principle. Are we in agreement about that?
It was transparently corrupt.
I think all disagreement between us rounds to zero,
right,
in the face of that obviously true sentence. Ken White, thank you for joining us.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
This was so fun.
Super fun, although we're not allowed to say we have fun on this show. We're only allowed to say it's in lieu of fun.
We have saber-toothed anchovies in place of fun.
Yes, keep it away from my pizza, please.
Saber-toothed anchovies. I want to say, like, when the saber-toothed anchovy creeps up on you from behind and its saber-tooth grazes the top of your head and it whispers in your ear, "This is revenge for the pizza." You know, we will all know that we are guilty.
We will.
So look, to everybody who has joined us today, who has never joined us before, this is the 50th time we have done this. We do it every day. We do it on weekends. Like, as long as there is lockdown, as long as we are not allowed to have fun, Kate, we're doing this today, right? Like, every day. This is day 50.
We do this every day.
And, you know, sometimes the people on the show are not Twitter and podcast celebrities like Ken White. Sometimes they are merely the most interesting science fiction writers and Renaissance historians you will ever encounter. Sometimes they are just people who are Wall Street Journal reporters with live bees that they are literally opening the hive while we have a conversation. Sometimes they are what else are they sometimes?
Well, sometimes they're Oren Kerr, but he's also kind of like an Twitter celebrity, so
yeah, exactly.
I can't say him.
You know, like we've had
a great select. We've sometimes they're emergency room doctors. We have
right.
Had, incredible amount of it's just been a great.
You guys are doing an amazing show, and people should watch it.
Thanks,
so like
Ken.
just like hang with us, and if you enjoyed this show, tweet it, you know, or share it on Facebook. We're doing no promotion of this of any kind. As you've noticed, we're not doing any advertising. We're not, you know, trying to institutionalize this. The day the lockdown ends for Kate and me, this show will end too. It's just something we're doing in lieu of fun that you may also find is a useful way to spend your time in lieu of fun. So, you know, do come and hang out with us sometime. Kate, what's our sign off today?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
This is also part of the show.
We can't have fun. Kate. I mean, like literally I have like some brain defect that I can't remember. We can't have fun anymore. So in lieu of fun, come hang out with us.
You're getting there.
Very nice.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Kate, I'll see you tomorrow.